Hello and welcome to The Society with Fatma Shaheen at PTV World. According to research findings of Foundation University Islamabad, both Facebook and Twitter claim a sizable number of fake news which very particularly relates to issues of international affairs, to issues of politics and also to issues of the economy. Now, having said that, of late we've also seen that not one, rather several claims of public figures, more particularly of women, have come forward claiming that they have been defamed online. Whereas generally we do see more of these cases being reported very openly in media, what we do not understand is the fact that contrary to popular belief, cyber crimes just do not constitute all of such claims. What do they all constitute? This is something upon which we'll be talking during the course of today's conversation. We'll also be talking about how the trends have changed over a period of time when it comes to commission of such crimes. We'll also be talking about who is the most vulnerable and of course why. In this regard, we'll also be shedding light upon the fact that when we talk about the role of the FIA, how effective has this role been with regards to not only timely investigating but also effectively prosecuting such crimes. Last but not the least, we'll be talking about the role of the society, which of course in that way encompasses the role of parents and of course educational institutions when it comes to creating awareness and sensitizing everybody about cyber crimes. This and much more to follow on today's show, and to do that, let me introduce you to my today's panel. My first panelist for the show today is Jahanzeb Nazir Khan Saab. He is the Director FIA of Cyber Crimes. Assalamu alaikum sir and welcome to the show. Alongside him, I have Ms. Jannat Fazal. She's a clinical psychologist and also a digital rights activist. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. And my third panelist for the show today is Ms. Anusha Atiq. She's a social worker and she's also an educationist. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Before we start the discussion on today's show, let's have
There is a pressing need for creating awareness about such crimes and expanding the number of cybersecurity experts.
welcome back. We just saw this report. Now to get the conversation started with you, sir. So I would like to quote the statistics of this report, which very clearly says that in Pakistan in the last 5 years, cyber crimes have increased, that too by 83%, with financial frauds at social media platforms topping the list. So as somebody who has had such vast experience of working in this very area, would you agree with the statistics of this report?
Thank you very much. Basically, what you have said initially is a very apt assessment of the things.
Right, sir.
The crimes which are on WhatsApp, Facebook, identity theft sometimes, crime against women or blackmailing or other issues like that, they contribute around 10 to 15% of the crime.
Right.
As we are a developing country and things are being digitized, commercial activities are being digitized, and they have gone into the cyberspace.
Right.
any frauds which are committed there, financial frauds and other frauds that are committed there, are basically the frauds which fall within the purview of cybercrime.
Right.
So most of that which we deal there is cybercrime. But having said that, certainly the financial frauds sometimes, unless they are at a very large scale, like the Ponzi schemes sometimes come and people fall in that in
Right.
numbers of thousands. Generally the crimes which are with our ladies and others attract more media.
Right, which is why they get all the hype, and I think contrary to
That's
popular
true.
belief, it's not an accurate depiction of what's actually happening on
That's
ground.
very true.
So, but basically make assessments with regards to who is most vulnerable, because over a period of time we also see that it's just not people who are semi-literate or for that matter illiterate, it's also very educated professionals. They are also falling prey to crimes more than one. So what reasons do you attribute to the same? Because clearly by that yardstick we can't say education in itself is something which helps you, rather protects you from not falling prey to such crimes.
That is very true. Now the thing is that criminals are also very smart. They come up with one idea, and if you let me tell you one way of doing the crime, and then I'll tell you another way of doing the crime. They used to call people and they used to tell the people that they have blocked their credit cards or something.
Right.
And they would ask them for their PIN number, and then they would take money out of that. Then we created an awareness. We told people that not to believe in these numbers and not to give anyone these. So they changed their modus operandi.
Right.
Now they mask the number and they call the people from the bank's helpline number.
So as to make it look very real, basically.
As to make it look very real.
Right.
Because when the person would come to us, he would say that I responded to the helpline number.
Right.
And then we tell them that, you know, the helpline would never call you back.
So you need to be in a way a step ahead of them. They are very sophisticated now.
They are
basically.
very sophisticated.
Right.
So the other thing is that when people stopped giving them the PIN numbers or the OTP codes, what they have done is that they send them a link, and they would ask them that go on the link, don't give us any information, please don't give anyone information, go on the link, click the link and put all your details there.
Right.
Basically it's their link.
Right, so your point is noted, on which I'll come to you. I also see, statistics suggest the fact that women who are journalists, women who are actresses, they perhaps might be more vulnerable compared to ordinary citizens. So in this regard, what reasons would you attribute?
This is a patriarchal society we live in, and in a patriarchal society, women in power or women who can shape opinions, they're the ones who get snubbed mostly. And similarly, women in media, women politicians, women journalists, because they are at a position where they can raise their voice around concerns related to women, where they can have that position where they can also change opinions. That is why they get targeted.
Right, Jannat. But coming towards you and continuation to what she said, in this regard, it's then very important to talk about the typical socio-cultural mindsets that we do have. And in ways more than one, we often see these typical stereotypes that we have, they kind of perpetuate such crimes. So what are the issues then that we as a society need to work on so as to, address this problem?
Absolutely. So, we're not living in isolation, right? So we can't isolate cyberbullying from like the reality, right? In a way, your cyber ecosystem reflects your actual society, what's happening in the actual society. And a lot of times, if you think about these, cyber bullies, a lot of times, one of the reasons as to why they do this is the lack of monitoring from the parents, right? Another aspect, and a very pertinent aspect could also be that, these bullies they lack empathy, right? So for example, they tend to like not to mingle with a lot of people, and so because of that, they tend to like, because you're at the back of the screen, and it's very easy for you to, then disclose without disclosing.
But these are the reasons because of which these crimes are committed. I'm asking you, like, what are the typical mindsets that people have? Like, often we see that even children who are being cyber harassed or cyber bullied, whenever they go up to their parents and complain about the same, they're often dismissed, or they might just get some backlash, if not from parents, from their peers. So in that regard, what are those issues, what are those typical societal attitudes that we as a society need to work on so as to be able to eradicate cyber crimes from the society?
Absolutely. I feel like, again, the idea of awareness and like being able to understand that, like creating that safe space for a child to have these conversations, right? Like you also mentioned that instead of dismissing your child, being open to having conversations with them, you know, if they're feeling uncomfortable, or if you see, for example, for them withdrawing from like, you know, your friends or family, if you notice that your child is, you know, when you enter the room, they suddenly change screens, like why is that happening? So just creating that safe space for them is very important, instead of just dismissing it or saying that, oh, you know, blaming your child for that matter. Why were you on the device, or why did you, you know, even talk to that stranger?
Right.
So having that safe space is very important.
Having those safe spaces.
Can I add on?
Yes,
to this?
please.
So I think we live in a society which victim blames. So when you are going to victim blame a child, they're not going to come up to you and tell you that, you know, I've been harassed. Or if you are going to blame that child for having talked to a stranger, or if you're going to blame that girl for having gone out or for wearing a certain type of dress, then of course they're not going to come to you.
Right.
We have to understand that at the end of the day, this is a crime that is being committed against.
It's a crime which has to do with the very mindset of the perpetrator as opposed to the way the victim behaves.
Yes,
So I think
yes.
these are the basics that we need to
Yes.
get straight here.
Yes.
So coming towards you, we do understand the fact a lot of times, and something which she just mentioned as well, these crimes are related to crimes which would otherwise be happening. For example, a woman might be cyber harassed also because she's previously been harassed by the same person perhaps in real life. So do you not feel then that at a very basic level we need to very actively work to eradicate these crimes from the real world so as to be able to eradicate them in the online spaces?
To tell you that I have seen a tendency that it is very difficult for someone to stand against in front of a woman and tell her things which he could tell her while staying on a social media platform.
Because you're anonymous.
You are anonymous, and they feel comfortable. They feel that they cannot be caught because they are hiding. And sometimes they also feel that they are comfortable in the space they are in.
Right. And so the access to electronic communication, that is so
That
easy
is
now.
right. But there is another thing, taking a cue from which both the ladies have said. What is happening is that whenever people come to us, be it the ladies or even the persons,
Right.
when they come to us, initially our staff used to judge them by their appearance and would say, as if she is very well dressed and something of that sort, they would say that, you know, she may have a reason, and because of that reason she has been harassed.
Right.
Now what we have done is that we have given them a refresher course or something where we have told them not to prejudge people
Of course.
and help them, and not to think what they do or what their fault is, but to see what plight they are having right now
Right.
and help them in that way.
Address it basically.
So we address the issue with which they come.
Right.
We don't judge them now.
So this is something very important on which I
Yes.
would want you to deliberate further, because a lot of times we see perhaps the attitude of different people who are involved, of course, in ensuring that people do get their rights. That is not appropriate, that is perhaps not sensitized, or that is perhaps not as aware as it should be ideally. So in cases like these, like what are the protocols that FIA follows? And in this regard, very important aspect which would then become very relevant today on the show would be that, you know, how do you ensure that women who come in with complaints which might be very personal for them, they get to complain openly about it, but at the same time their privacy and their dignity is something which is maintained, it is something which is not violated. So how particularly is that balance struck?
We have a system where whatever information they give stays with the senior officer, and it is not divulged to anyone, it is not given to anyone. However, it is submitted in the court, and from the court the lawyers, the other party's
Right.
lawyer have access to that information, and they may again disseminate that information or something, but
Yes.
it's unlikely.
Okay.
So we try to keep the sanctity of that information, and we try to have these checks on our system where the information is kept
Right.
closely guarded. One. The other portion is that we have a counselor, a lady who is a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and she has the means to talk to women. She would bring forth whatever that is there. Sometimes the women, even after coming to us, are
Right.
shy in revealing the exact
Of
situation
course.
because they want to safeguard something which they think is traditionally not right.
Right.
It is culturally inappropriate.
Right.
So she guides them and tells them that you have to give the whole information and don't mind anything which is not culturally right or traditionally right.
Right.
And then again, if some young lady comes to us, we ask sometimes the guardians to go away so that we could talk
Openly
to the
talk to
lady,
them, right.
and she is not pressurized
So this
into
is
a
so
situation.
important because a lot of people don't even know that a lot of times we see that these crimes are being committed with minors, and we have
Yes.
seen cases of child pornography surface as well.
Even with minors and even with adults sometimes,
Right.
but young ladies, they may be adults, but they have pressures. Sometimes the ladies have pressure from their husbands,
Right.
brothers. So we try to give them a space where they can openly tell us, and even that information is not divulged to their relations.
Right. This is what I wanted to draw on, sir, that, you
Yes.
know, that information is kept very private.
That is kept very private. So what happens is that while we are in this process where we try to rehabilitate the person, give them confidence to come forward,
Right.
and we try to safeguard the privacy and the confidentiality of that information.
Right.
We build a case where in a way we build a strong case against the perpetrator, but what we do is that we try to conceal the facts which are not required in the case,
Right.
and those facts could give a bad name to the family or something
Right.
of that
So it's a
sort.
very fine line that
It's
you
a
have
very
to draw.
fine line. It takes a lot of effort from our investigating
And expertise
officers.
too.
And expertise, certainly. Now, this is one portion of it, as we discussed earlier.
Right.
There is another portion, and that is that many of the people would come to us who are victims of financial crime.
Right,
They are
sir.
men. They are very successful people. They are business people. They are entrepreneurs. They come to us and they are annoyed, not because they have lost money, but because they would say that how could I
Right. So
be
this is something
deceived.
which I earlier discussed as
Yes.
well, that education per se is something which just wouldn't save you, because these criminals, these perpetrators are so sophisticated in the tactics that they do use to rob you, on which I'll come to you. The very act of filming these events, which of course has a very negative impact on the emotion and of course the psychological well-being of people who are subjected to the same. So as a psychologist, how do you treat these people? Because the trauma of theirs would be something which is just not one-off, it is, you know, of a continuing nature.
Yes. So if let's say, you know, their non-consensual images or videos have been leaked, or they're on the internet. So the first thing is, in order to help them heal, it's very important that those videos get taken down. So there are different organizations, there are different platforms you can use to get those taken down, because otherwise you'll be re-traumatized again and again and again, and people are going to come to you and tell you that, you know, this is there out there in the world. So of course it's very important, the first step is to be able to talk about that, and
Right.
for them to heal, it's important that that gets taken down. So once that is taken down and you start the process, because, you know, we understand that the people might come in with PTSD symptoms because there's trauma. So you have to be trauma informed, and you have to help them heal, because you have to tell them that this did not happen, because most of the times
People are
survivors-
blaming themselves.
Yes, and they
Right.
internalize guilt. So you have to sort of tell them that there's nothing to be shameful about, and this did not happen because of them.
Right.
And they have to understand that whatever happened, somebody did wrong to them.
Right.
They were not at fault
Right,
at
of course.
all. So
But I think this is a general issue that we need to generally overcome
Yes.
in the society
Yes.
per se. Very important point. A lot of times we see that these crimes are being committed on different social media platforms, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. And we also understand the fact the reporting mechanisms and the community guidelines per se, they might be different for each of these forums. So
Yes.
in cases like these, wouldn't the reporting process itself that become very kind of fragmented?
So basically, every forum has their own reporting mechanism. It's just that because when we start using these forums, we don't understand what the privacy guidelines are, what the reporting mechanisms are. They're very simple, they're very easy. And besides that, there are also organizations working within Pakistan that you can reach out to, and they can get things taken down for you. although it's a lengthy process, but I think it's also very important that we sort of our state reaches out to these tech companies, big techs, and talk to them as to what policies they need to have, because what may come across as harassment or a crime in another country may not
talk
be
about simple things like harassment if you read the
Yes.
law as well.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, I think a very clear line needs to be drawn
Yes.
between something which is said in a friendly manner and of course something which is offensive, on which I'll come to you. And the role of educationists is something which becomes very paramount. And now we do see in the Western jurisdictions, more particularly America, we do see we have very clear-cut cyberbullying policies, and those policies being implemented in schools. In Pakistan, why can we not have similar policies so as to ensure that children who do get bullied, at least to the extent of the schools, they get remedies too?
Absolutely. I feel that we definitely need to have these policies in place where we co-create these policies, right, with your teachers, with your school administrators, students, as well as the parent body, the stakeholders at large.
Right.
Incorporate your experts, right? We have Jannat, we have experts like Sir here. Have them on board and also incorporate that, embed it in your curriculum, where students are on a regular basis taught about, let's say when we talk about life skills, also
Right.
incorporate digital literacy within those life skills curriculum,
Right.
where, students are then taught about what is cyberbullying, right? And what to do, like what steps to take in case, if, for example, you face such cyberbullying, and also have information sessions for parents, right? Because a lot of times parents also sometimes, like we've already mentioned, might be dismissive and be
Right.
without even realizing, without having that awareness, what kind of impact them being dismissive might have on their child.
Right, and Nusha, your point is noted. On which, sir, I'll come to you. I think in this regard, we must also, talk about the various roadblocks and, of course, the challenges that FIA does face when it comes to, investigating, or for that matter, prosecuting those who actually commit such crimes. So, for the benefit of the audience, could you tell us what are the practical issues that you people come across so as to be able to put such people to task?
Well, actually, the issue starts from the reporting. It takes a lot of time for people to muster up that courage to come
Right.
to us, especially in cases where they feel that they have done something culturally or traditionally wrong. And then it takes them time to come to us. Once they come to us, sometimes it's late and we cannot gather the digital footprint.
Right.
Because cybercrime is all about creating an evidence and finding the evidence on the basis of the digital footprint. If we lose that footprint, we are not in a position to establish a case. So the people need to respond quickly. That's what we are doing in our awareness campaigns. We tell the people to come to us quickly. We are going to educational institutions also, and we tell the people that if you are in a problem, if you are have some cyber issue, please come to us very quickly so that
Right.
we are in a position to respond quickly. Then once we go to investigations, we have some issues with the international agencies because we don't have MLIT, that is
Right.
Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty with most of the organizations. So we write to these Facebook or social media platforms, and sometimes they answer us, sometimes they don't.
Right.
Because what we were discussing here, that some of the issues, they keep them in freedom of speech,
Exactly.
and they say that this is not a crime.
That's where the community guidelines kick in, basically.
Yes. But then there is another way of tackling that issue, and we go to the court and we ask the court that we need this information, and the court then gives us the order, and we send that order to them, but that takes time.
I was about to say that because, sir, there are so many cases in which time is of essence.
Yes.
For example, if somebody is being harassed or if somebody's objectionable material is being leaked out at perhaps 12 in the midnight, then how particularly would they be able to access FIA until unless the FIA office opens up the very next day? So in cases like these where people at an emergency level, they need help, and what are your measures then? How do you cater to needs of such people?
This is one thing which should be noted by all, that we have an online system of applications. We have a reporting center that works all through the day, and so there is very little time where people are not catered.
Okay.
So it's very easy to come up, and
Right.
in a few hours, this is not that kind of emergency where in few hours something happens. But however, in a longer period of time, if it is not reported, sometimes the victim suffers irreparable loss.
Exactly.
If there are pictures or videos which are objectionable and they are disseminated and they are sent on media, then the loss which is suffered by the victim is irreparable, because we may take them off, we may act against the person, but many people have seen those videos in that particular period of time.
Right.
So people need to come to us quickly, and we need to have agreements. We have devised a system where people can online submit complaints. We have made reporting centers where people can come and submit complaints. It's very easy. The process is very easy. And then what difficulty is that when we ask these social media platforms to provide us the information, it takes a lot of time, because we don't have MLATs. MLAT is Mutual Assistance Legal Treaty. Unfortunately, we don't have that. So we request them, and once we request them, then the situation which is already discussed here, that is related to the fact that sometimes they say this is not something which is a crime, this is basically a freedom of speech issue.
Right, sir. Basically the subjectivity of the community guideline.
So it goes into a negotiation.
Right.
But then there is a way around to it. We ask the court to give us an order, and then we send the order to them. Still, unfortunately, as they don't fall within the purview of our local courts, sometimes they don't provide us the information.
Exactly.
But once we enter into these treaties with them, we have agreements with them for which the government is trying to do, then we are in a position to get information quickly, and we would be in a position to convict more cases.
Exactly. So because you see, this is a problem which is rampant in other parts of the world too. I was going over this report which actually suggested that even in the US, the likelihood of successfully prosecuting cyber crimes, that is 0.5%. So in Pakistan, what are the areas you feel that we need to work on so as to improve the conviction rate?
Well, there is a situation when I say that people don't trust our numbers, and they say that we are fudging the numbers, but we have a better conviction rate than most of the developed countries.
Right.
The inquiry or the investigation officers here work hard, and again the issue is that sometimes as the victims are not that techy, the criminals are not that techy also. So we find loopholes and we get convictions. But certainly it is very difficult to convict a person in a cyber crime case, because you have to...
Because there are so many factors involved. You have to ensure that you have the right evidence and timely investigations. Prosecution needs to be very strong.
Yes, and that's what they say, that you know, in order to convict a person, you have to prove it beyond doubt.
Of course, beyond reasonable doubt.
If there is a single shred of doubt, the case is thrown out. So in digital communication, there is always a thread.
Because there is so much anonymity attached to it, basically.
So much anonymity.
Right, sir. On which, Janat, I'll come to you. In this regard, it's equally important that we also talk about this correlation which does exist between getting exposed to violence, be it through television screens, or for that matter, be it through games which actually incite violence, and then as a consequence, actually committing violence. So as a clinical psychologist, where do you see that link? Because if that link does exist, then this is of course something that we do need to work on when we talk about tackling cyber crimes.
So we have to understand it can't be one factor, there are multi-factors involved. So if somebody is seeing violence around them, they're going to internalize it. We have to see what we are teaching our children in our society. If they're seeing violence at home, which we do see, because it's a patriarchal society, if you don't see it at home, you'll see it in other relationships.
Right.
So if you're seeing that in your media, that is something which gets highlighted a lot. We see all the dramas made around that. So if you're seeing all of that around you, of course you're going to internalize it. So if you're also playing those games, it's going to affect you. So it's not just one thing, it's many things, and we have to sort of understand that whatever we are seeing in our real world, it's going to be reflected in our online spaces as well.
Which is why they very rightly say, when they say in order to get rid of all these cyber crimes which do happen in cyberspaces, we need to actually address the root causes of this in the real world.
Yes, because our online spaces are a reflection of our offline spaces and they're connected. We tend to think of them as two separated bodies when they're not. When you know, they intersect. So it's an extension of who we are in our online world as well. So we have to see, if we're seeing violence here in our offline spaces, we are going to do that. We're going to project that violence there. So with like Sarah already pointed out, that when you have that anonymous in an online space, you would want to do something because you can get away with it. So there are no consequences.
Goes back to
it.
actually ensuring that we need to seriously work on improving our conviction rate, because the greater the conviction rate, the greater the chances of people being deterred into not committing such crimes.
Yes.
On which I'll come to you, Anushree. I think we must also talk about the role of media, and by media I mean mainstream media, electronic media, print media, and of course social media. So when we talk about media, what role can media here play so as to educate people about such crimes, so as to make them aware of the same? And here I think it's very important that we also talk about those areas which are very remote and very far flung, because we often see that such crimes are committed in rural areas of the country too.
Absolutely, and that's a very valid question, and I think very important question to answer also, because I believe that when we talk about like awareness, right, media has like a huge role to play. For example, PTV World right now, you have a show called The Society, right? We know that there's a lot of penetration of television amidst our masses. So like educate them through these platforms, for example, also using dramas, right? So like bring them awareness through, like, have dramas on cyberbullying, right? We have certain shows online also now, but Pakistan can also make those shows.
So I think in this regard, it's very important then to talk about movies here too, because a lot of times we've seen that Pakistan has had some Oscar-winning movies too, with regards to highlighting very important social causes, with regards to honor-killing crimes, with regards to, I remember there was this movie made on acid attacks too. So why can we not have similar movies address these issues too?
Absolutely, we should definitely have such movies, dramas made, in terms of also have shows, right, where you were talking about cyber harassment, cyberbullying, bringing awareness amongst the masses, and adding on, you have these digital content creators, right? You have your influencers, you have celebrities even, for example, even they can talk about cyberbullying, the consequences of it, what kind of resources they can go and, take a look at for their own particular awareness. And I also believe that it's a huge responsibility as individual citizens also to have these conversations and to be that safe space for people, right? So also like imbibe that, have these conversations of being kind to people, right? To not kind of comment anything online that, you wouldn't want to say anybody on their face. And so I'll kind of also now, moving on to the rural areas that you talked about, that part of the question, that it's important to have these awareness campaigns. You can have that, and you can target like male members of the society, because it's a very patriarchal society. Sometimes people may not feel comfortable their wives or daughters going to such people who are here for awareness purposes. So like Sir also mentioned that there are fraud activities and bring awareness to that in terms of digital literacy to men, and chances are they'll have a conversation with their wives and talk about, hey, this is different ways where you can
I think with this regard, in continuation to what you said, then it's equally important that we also educate and sensitize men, because a lot of times we see this kind of opposition that does come from the male counterparts of that very particular household, to which you wanted to add something.
Yeah, so basically when you will include men, even if women do not have access, even if they get harassed because somebody is taking a picture, unless they would know that this is cyber harassment, they won't be able to reach out to authorities or report it. So if men know this is basically wrong or this is a crime, they'd be able to educate women around them. So it's very important that at least they'd have resources. And when we talk about media, we can also use radio, which is one medium that is everywhere apparently,
or even theatre for that matter. So theatre is such an interesting way. It's a very visual way of getting a message across.
I mean, we can get the message across, and it's, I think since 2016 we've had Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act, so it's about time that state and non-profit organizations start working on it and spread that information, because it's very important.
But I think the stress here should be that everybody needs to be on the same page here. On which, Sir, I'll come to you, and before we conclude today's show, I think it's extremely important that we also talk about FII's role with regards to raising awareness about basically educating people about cyber crime. So in this regard, can you tell us that, what exactly is the scope of such campaigns? Is it just limited to educating people about what cyber crimes are, or does it also extend to actually telling them that how can they, prevent themselves from falling victims to such crimes?
Initially, when this cybercrime was initiated and we have this Cybercrime Act, we were basically responsible for investigations and then prosecution. But we realized at this stage that we should have a three-pronged policy. And prevention is a major portion of that. And in prevention, we realized that we have to educate people and create awareness. Then we saw what is which part of the society we can aim, which
Right.
would give results very quickly. And we thought that the young generation who are in schools and colleges, high schools certainly, not the primary schools, high schools and colleges, we and universities, we attract them, we tell them what to do and what not to do.
Right.
And if something goes wrong, where to report.
Okay.
And with these concepts, we started interacting with them. We have also interacted with the other private organizations, and we give them information and we give them lectures, not only to them, but also we organize workshops
Right.
with the chambers of commerce and other places where businessmen are available for financial crimes. And this is how we are creating an awareness in it. The success we have in this awareness is that the young generation is now aware of the things,
Comparatively more aware.
comparatively more aware, and they know things more than their parents, and sometimes they tell their parents what to do and how to do it.
Whether
and
parents
what.
accept it or not, I think that's a different story.
Yes, but the parents are happy as far as financial crimes are concerned.
Right, of course,
Still,
yeah.
we have problems with the fact that the parents judge their children on social taboos
Right.
and the cultural and religious inhibitions which they have.
Right.
But that is also changing over a period of time.
Right.
And you know, sympathy and empathy for a victim is the most important portion of this awareness.
Right. And I think this is something on which I would want you to deliberate further, because you have that real life narrative of treating so many survivors of cybercrime. So in this regard, what role can mental health care professionals like yourself play when it comes to treating, when it comes to rehabilitating, when it comes to integrating these people back into the society?
We have a trauma-informed approach, and also we understand that no matter what, I mean, as a psychologist, acceptance is something that you have to give to your client.
Right.
So that is one thing, that you have to have a trauma-informed approach, and also you have to accept. So even if, you know, there's something which may not sit well with you because you think it's culturally inappropriate or religiously inappropriate, or it shouldn't have been done, or you think that, okay, they had some role to play in it, you cannot blame them. And you
Right.
have to understand that this is a crime that has been committed against them, and they should get all the help that they need, and they should be able to go out there without any shame. So
Right.
even if they have to have that confidence, the survivors have to be have to have that confidence where they go out and they be like, you know, I didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
So what has happened to me is wrong, and I shouldn't be ashamed of it.
Here, a very important part of, I think, the whole equation is also to actually sensitize and counsel the families, because
Yes.
you need to have very strong support systems.
Yes.
You need to have very strong support networks so as
Yes.
to be able to get out of that
Yes.
trauma, on which I'll come to. And before we conclude today's show, in this regard, educationists like yourself, social workers like yourself, rather young people like yourself, they also have a very pivotal role to play. Since this is an issue which stems from the society, it's of course very logical to attribute the solutions to the society too. So what are those cultural sensitive approaches that we as a responsible society need to take so as to tackle all these issues?
So I feel like firstly being self-aware also. So, you know, when we talked about empathy, right, like being able to empathize with cyberbully victims, I feel like we also need to go a step further and talk about compassion, where compassion comes into play. You're like, you know, you not only understand the other person's pain, but you're also there to help them and support them and tell them, you know, hey, I'm here for you and I'm here for your support. But I feel like, again, like we've mentioned, we're a society, we're all interlinked, everything's interlinked. Everybody, be it schools, parents, community workers, anybody, every one of us are interlinked, even, you know, our house help, everybody, this is an ecosystem, and we aren't independent of each other. And so it's important to have these, Pakistan, we all know, has like majority of youth population. So important to have these community mobilization initiatives at place.
Right. On which note, I would like to conclude today's show. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Jannat, and thank you so much, Anushe. Well, to conclude today's show, we generally spoke about the increasing commission of cyber crimes as they do happen in the Pakistani society. We also spoke about the work of FIA so as to tackle the same with regards to having timely investigations, and of course with regards to also improving its own prosecution. In this regard, it's very important that when we talk about tackling this social evil, it's very important that we educate the society at large about the same. It's very important that we create maximum awareness about the same. And here it is very important that the media plays a very pivotal role, because we need to educate people that yes, they do have that right to freely express themselves in online spaces, but they need to do it in a manner which is respectful of other person's privacy and of course dignity too. On that note, signing off for today. Until next time, take care. Allah Hafiz.